Yes, on that note, we do have a very second speaker. I'm sure amongst you, she is nobody that you don't know. Yes, she is somebody that each and every one of you already know about her. She is an architect, researcher, director, and founder principal of NITIS School of Architecture, Planning and Design, Bengaluru. She has served in various institutions of repute as professor and founder principal and director of Thakur School of Architecture and Planning. She is regional director of Center for Education Growth and Research for Karnataka Council, Life and Fellow, addition to National Academic Advisory Council member of CEGR. She graduated from WINIT Nagpur, Masters from SAP, Anna University, MBA in Operations and Supply Chain from NIMB, Chennai, and PhD in Architecture and Planning, again from Anna University, Chennai. She is trained Six Sigma Black Belt from ISL Hyderabad, QMS Lead Auditor from CII, Bengaluru. She has Advanced Diploma in Web and E-Com Technologies. She worked in multimedia quality and software development areas in CWL Global and Gates Academy in association with Saint Monica Studio, USA. Was a part of SFX and VFX for films such as Koi Mil Gaya, Devdas, etc. She worked on international projects in multimedia production. She has 33 years of experience in architectural education and profession. As quality and multimedia consultant, currently engaged in research in the area of sustainable artificially intelligence nanomaterials, neuroarchitecture, intangible values in architecture. She is the recipient of BTU, VGST and AICTE ISTE funding for the conduction of FDP programs in creating value in architecture and skill mapping orientation and training. Ladies and gentlemen, she has received many awards, of which few of quote are Best Teachers Award 2012, Pan India from architect S.D. Sharma, who worked with Le Corbusier and is principal architect of A3 Foundation. Visionary Leader of the Year 2019 to 2020 from CEGR, Inspirational Leader of the Year 2020 from Integrated Chamber of Commerce of India, had been an all-rounder throughout her school days till her graduation. Trust me, I'm getting goosebumps with all these achievements, ma'am, you have. I'm saying, you guys, you should give her a round of applause. Was a judge for an event of Guinness Book of World Records for 1 centimeter into 1 centimeter chessboard and coin design organized by DQ Labs. She has to be conference and conference session chair for the international conferences held in China, Singapore, Greece, and many others. Conducted many international and national conferences, symposiums, FDPs, and been an editor for conference proceedings. She was invited as a guest for 20 programs, published over 40 papers in international and national journals and conference proceedings. She has been successful in establishing the Institute Innovation Council, MOE, and Collaborative Incubation Center at NETE Schools of Architecture, Planning and Design, currently applied to VTU to establish a research center. Ladies and gentlemen, this wonderful lady, this wonderful woman that we're talking about with so many accomplishments, I would request all of you to kindly give a round of applause, and I shall invite Professor Dr. Architect Chandran Rekha Jetty, ma'am, over on stage. I would request you to please come over on stage, ma'am, to share your experience about architecture. With a round of applause, please. I'm stunned.
Thank you, Dr. Anand, for inviting me as a speaker in this program. Respected Jaisim sir and Timaya sir, with whom I have really spent quite a lot of my time, my fellow colleague architects and other speakers in this August gathering. My journey, I do not want to start from beginning. I would rather start from a stage where I got into the institution and started seeing at the students how they were actually working. First time ever I thought of was about creating value in architecture. We all talk of tangible values. We talk of events, we talk of activities in a given space. Activities and events, they are not stemming from the subconscious stage. So my search was to find out how a real value can be attached to an architecture piece. And then I conducted and I applied to AICTE and VGST with a proposal on trying to find out how people think about creating value in architecture. In one of the sessions, at the panel discussion and in the final moments, where architect Jaisim sir was also present. That was in Akar. And during that time, I found out in all the presenters were more talking only in terms of the activity spaces, how it is designed. I was not satisfied. Then I went across to find out little more deeper into the skills. Then I applied to AICTE and ISTE for the funding for organizing for another FTP, which was focused towards the skills of students, skills of teachers, and then we started mapping, use the psychologists, everybody. We started mapping them, and then during that entire process, still we found the skills were not stemming from the subconscious level. They were the acquired skills. So that is when I began to look for something beyond. I went and talked to my neurologist. The incident happened at my home. My father, he had Parkinson, and very intelligent person, was an entrepreneur. He was, later on in the later stage, he joined L&T and he was in a very top position in Larsen & Toubro, doing extensive researching and teaching also to the students during his off time as a passion. But all his intelligence, everything, came to almost zero because there was a neurological failure. Then I realized that our students need to be, getting down deeper into the subconscious state of the user and try to find out what they are going through, and accordingly design for the age and the time from when they want to be in, not from the time before them. Which means to say, it need not necessarily be from the time, say, today. It could be 10 years later time from when what would be ahead like. That was something which we found out. And then this particular presentation is about neuroarchitecture, which stemmed up in the year 2003. Okay, so here you can see only 5% is the conscious state, and this is the 5% which is like an iceberg that we architects are using, and 95% is below in the subconscious state, and that is the reason we have so many intangible values for any building. Like we try to tell, okay, this at instance we say that this is fine, this is good, And when you do the post, occupation evaluation, you find that the user is not happy with. They come out with lot many differences in their opinion, what they wanted and what the architect gave them. So the Academy of Neurosciences for Architecture, ENFA, in 2003, Dr. Fred Geck, he is the one who coined the term called neuroarchitecture. Okay, and this particular, it links three areas. One is architecture and consciousness, another is neuroscience and neurology, and third is psychology and behavioral unconscious. When we design as architect, generally we talk about the consciousness, conscious state of mind. Whatever we feel, I like this, I want this, this is what. But there are a lot of things which are there in the psychological level, which are in the unconscious state. Of late, we have started even looking into that intricately. But when there is a book called Architect's Brain, that particular book, if you read, you will find that the many architects, architects from the very early times, they have also been studying about the brain patterns, but they have not actually utilized that in full respect for any building, partially let off. Then there is a neuroscience and neurology. Now, in the layman's term, neuroarchitecture refers to different responses produced by the brain of the user during their presence in a certain environment. Now, it has a relationship to the way the person's health conditions are in terms of the neurons, the different neurotransmitters that come. Now just let us look at how our entire system is. If you just look at, we have a spine and all the nerves are connected to that particular spine, which means to say every of our thought, whether it is a subconscious thought or a conscious thought, or what we want, what we are scared of, what we like and what we want to really get excited about, all that gets recorded only in those nerves which ultimately rest in the brain. Next. And now we are looking at how all our, for example, like when you enter a space, you would have thought that, okay, this is a normal space we are entering. The moment you step in, either there is an excitement or a fear or some kind of an impulses that come into. So what happens is your nerves, there are three types of nerves that are there, they activate. One is this autonomic nerve. That particular nerve is, you don't have any control. It is on the involuntary organs of our body which responds. For example, digestive system, lungs, heart, everything is involuntary. The nerves around them are those. Then you have the motor nerves, then you have sensory nerves. Sensory, the moment you touch, you have sensory organs, immediately it sends you a signal. So everything is based on the signal. And the neurotransmitters, they are the fundamental that we need to know when we are designing the house, or for that matter, any space. Excitatory are there, then inhibitory, then modulatory. Modulates or inhibits or excites. So these are all neurotransmitters. Then you have the different types of neuron. There is a receptor, then you have neurotransmitter getting into the receptor, and there is a synapse, and then you have the message sent to your organs and body. Why we are irrational? We are irrational only because of this thing, that when the signals go in, a signal, now it may be like, okay, this is a fantastic call, I'm fine. The next signal could be like, oh, come on, I saw that may be a problem. Then immediately we go down. So how do architects, design buildings for that kind of the stimuli that come into? That is most important. Now we talk about, so before getting into, I have taken a study of children's, home, where I'll be actually telling you how it needs to be done. Before that, this needs to be elaborated. See, the left brain and right brain, when students come into architecture, you would have really found out from them that either they think very technically, very logically, or they are highly creative, they are not good in maths, They are not good in science. They are very artistically oriented. So in the spectrum, you will be seeing somebody with the fine arts, where the technological skills will not go into their mind. Then comes the BDES, where little bit of technology is there, still there is a creative field. Architecture balances between the two, where you have technology also, you have even the creative field, both balanced, well balanced. Then you have the planning programs, where it is more of technological orientation and less of the, say, creative areas. And then the engineering, which is highly techno-oriented, and we call that as a techno-creative, technologically creative area. So this entire thing is done by our brain structure, which the right brain, which takes care of our entire left side of the body, and the left brain, which takes care of our entire right side of the body. This activation of this, which side is really more, decides how creative a person is, whether he is a linear creativity he has or he is having a lateral creativity. The lateral creativity talks more about breadth, innovation, uniqueness, analogies, out-of-box thinking, non-logic thinking. And linear creativity will talk about focus, depth, skills, hard work, experience, growth, and expansion. So you can yourself identify what kind of a person it is. It's very essential that when we start designing for anybody, we try to understand the user in terms of, especially when you are dealing with the houses, because it is very unique, very close to one person's heart. And what kind of person that person to whom you are designing are. Now, this is something which is very much related to what we do in architecture. See, look at that. Like, we have different kinds of mapping which is done by the neurology. Neurological people, they take lot of neurology, even cardiology, everybody they take. EEG is there, ECG is there, HP, BP, MRI is there, and all these things. But where does it relate to? What does it signify? EEG is about done by for the brain. It will talk about the form and the geometry. So that is the functional part that is being identified. Then next is the furniture style and the context. That if you look at it, is at the center, almost at the midline. From there it is taken. So how we think about the furnitures and the context. Height in the enclosure. These are again some, you can see that. It is on the right brain and the left brain, which is going to be governing your right side of the body. Then materiality and texture. So all these depends on totally how your brain is functioning about. Next. Now, a person is a pessimist or is very excited or somebody who is very calm and listening, and all that is identified by the kind of the neurotransmitters that are there in a person. I will focus more on the children and the house because that is very close to my heart too. And if the person at the home is, say, has a memory issue or he is having learning issue or calming issue, these things, we need to take into account and accordingly design if they have a memory problem. Recently, one of my faculty was telling that her father-in-law, he suffers from Alzheimer. And he has been throwing everything from the window down. Now the first thing comes in when all the materials of his wife is throwing from the window down into the ground floor, and they are in third floor or so. So now the question comes, like, when they knew like very clearly there is a memory issue and there's a person, then why didn't some arrangement being made? Then the first question that I asked her was, did you make any arrangement to ensure that all the materials that is being dropped is collected in one place? She said yes. We fortunately took care of that. We made it kind of a trolley like anything he's throwing, it is getting into that and we are pulling it out. Instead of they having to come down from the 3-4 down and then searching for the materials. So these are, for example, calming, learning, memory, euphoria, then mood, pleasure, then concentration. We talk of students not having concentration. It cannot be every time saying that the student does not like. It's not about like or dislike. The first thing we need to ask is, okay, the students, do they have sufficient neurotransmitters in their body for the concentration? You must have heard of this ADH people. They have certain chemicals which are too much and some are very less. So those kind of things we need to identify in the students. So this we started doing by, first we got our psychologists who try to evaluate the students, and now we are going to be getting our neurologists into the action so that our students, we can make out like what are the issues so that their learning becomes easier and what they design becomes really useful. Next. This is the book. I certainly say, request all of you to go through, probably this will help quite a lot. Architect's Brain, Neuroscience, Creativity and Architecture by Harry Francis Mulgrave, Willy Blackwell publisher. See, here you see, we talk about Alberti, Vitruvius, Leonardo, all these so many architects of the past. And their brains are all classified already. That is humanistic brain, enlightened brain, sensational brain, and whatever they design, they fall into these categories. That is what that book says. Okay, and then you have there's something called phenomenal brain, then neurological brain, then Gestalt brain, so many emphatic brain, animate brain. There is a classification of each of our brains. So it is very necessary we understand the inmate of a particular building, user of that particular building, what kind of a person he is, not from what he appears. Everybody will be appearing very happy and nice and telling, I want this, this, this. But internally there will be something else, which is in the subconscious, superconscious level. Perhaps sometimes they won't know, but their reactions tell us. Next. On this thing, you know, like this Indian architect, Sudhir Pasla, he has worked out, he says that while fractal-like shapes help us navigate within the building or this one, but it is better to have the spatial perceptions in terms of symmetry, connection, and simplicity. So this is what he has come out with a solution. Next. And there is one more architect, Thomas Fisher, who has worked on this particular concept of when they are blind. What is it that needs? They will not tell you. All of us, we think that if they have that stick and they can walk around everywhere. No, we have seen that happening, like when they are crossing the road, they are falling, and they tend to cross the road at the same place where they have always been crossing the road. They don't go to the unknown locations just like that. They need some, experience walking in that particular path quite a number of times. So what you see in the red zone is the one which is actually the trigger point for them, and that is what makes them understand in their brain, okay, this is this place, this is how I need to walk. Next. This is again the same thing. Acoustical, they talk of acoustic and tactile, and these are the red marks that are being put at edge. They are the treatment areas needs to be done to make them, take those paths. Next. Neuroarchitecture applied in children's design. This is what I would be just speaking for a few minutes. There are 12 principles that are there in this presentation that will be, this is being live telecast and will be available in your YouTube, that you can go through one by one because of the lack of time, I cannot take a long time to explain everything. So, but the children design, that I will take it up. We could say that adults acquire knowledge through our intelligence, while the child absorbs it with his psych life. Thus, the child undergoes a transformation. Impressions not only penetrate her mind, but form it. It's like consolidation. Doctors, if you go to doctors, they'll say that till the child is up to 8 years, the brain is open. Everything that we say, it gets into the brain. But after 8 till 16, it starts slowly closing, and then you say that the childhood memory, everything, it is locked inside, and that supersedes any other experiences that a person may have in the later date in the life. That's why if you ask yourself, you will always go back to your child life. You'll say that, oh, as a child I did that, I did this, my parents were like that, I had so many friends, I used to go climb the hills and all those kind of things. Okay. They fit into it. The child creates her own mental flesh around the thing found in her environment. We call her mental type the absorbing mind. So this is the particular document which has come from Maria Montessori in the Absorbent Mind on page 194, 1949, p37. Okay, so 1949, the p37. So this particular document is found there, and this is very much fits into the child if you just closely observe your child. Next. You see this environment directly influences how it is influencing. The child this is something that the child always keeps it in their memory because this is attached to their emotions. You see here, good memories are positively decoded by the brain. That is why investing in visual, auditory or olfactory memories are more important. So in the visual thing, you take the child anywhere. They will be mentally recording this. I'll just tell you a small example. When my son was just about 3 years old, I just dropped a needle. Okay, he had just dropped a needle. It slipped from my hand, and I was trying to search where it has gone because I needed that very badly. All my son did is, he said, "Mom, the voice came, I could hear that fall here." I said, "How you could hear?" He said, "Wait, I'll get you." He just slept over, saw, on the planes, and he picked it out and gave it to me. It was so surprising, like, how could he find in such an open area? If it is a small area, then what happens is it is easier to pick. In such an open area, it could have gone anywhere. So it is a recording that happens in the absorbed mind. Next. It is preferable to incorporate natural light, and we talk of the natural and the artificial lights. So 20% it is better lit classrooms will have better learning environment for the children if it is naturally lit. Okay, instead of just going with the artificial. Artificial is required, but to an extent only. Next. Special attention must be paid to the projects for children. It is very necessary that there is a space where the father and the child or the mother and the child spend time together in learning habits. Okay, so the first years of the individual's life are the most important for their education, determining the constitution of their personality, self-esteem and character. This self-esteem is extremely important. We generally think that children don't care about all those things. They care a lot. If they don't wear the dress properly, at least elders, we say, "Oh, come on, it's okay," and we walk off. But children want to really dress up properly and go. They say, "Mummy, am I okay?" Especially the girl children. You just be with them for a little longer, you will easily know about these things. Yeah. Then it is very essential to have furnitures which fit into their, their size and all that. Having big furnitures for them and asking them to sit next to you in the big furnitures, it doesn't really help because these are the things that goes into their memory. It has to be more of their type, items of their type, coloration of their type. Next. Among the advantages of preparing environment to meet the needs of the children is the strengthening of their self-esteem. Self-esteem, how does it come? Like children, when they bring another child to the home, they like the home to be really good. In the perception of another child, not in the perception of what elders think about. Next. And then they need to, they have to, feel the belonging to that place. That is very, very essential. They need to feel that they belong to that place. That all the space and the places that are created around, they need to feel belong to that. So that is very important. These are some of the innate things the absorbent mind of the child has. Next. The child's mind during early childhood can be divided into two phases. The unconscious absorbent mind from 0 to 3 years old and the conscious absorbent mind from 3 to 6 years. This theory establishes that from birth, the child absorbs all the stimuli from the environment in which they find themselves in the same way that a sponge does. That is why it is so important to design suitable spaces for them. We talk of in our Mahabharata, we talk about Abhimanyu. In the womb of the mother, he learnt everything. Only thing he did not learn is how to come out of the Chakravyuh, because the story stopped there. That is very true. What is done before the birth and what is done after the birth for up to the 3 years, from 0 to 3 years, is the one which will decide what kind of a personality the child is going to be. Next. Then we have this environment at home appropriate to the dimensions of the child and his strengths. See, keeping a very, very strong thing and child trying to pull, not able to reach, falling, these things, set a negative impact on them. So that is very essential that it is kept in a very orderly way that child can pick. And usually children have the habit of following the mother. What mother does, they want to do the same thing, especially the girl children. Those things also should be given a lot of importance. Next. Then you see here that music, that the environment of music, silence, all those things should be embedded in one single space. Where you see there the child can go for the music and the child, they need not be together, they can be separate also. This kind of not forcing them to an activity. We see a lot of things being forced, say in the school, saying that you have to do this, you have to do that. Those things won't help. Next. Hearing is very important, and the texture, feel of the texture is extremely important for the child, and usually by the texture, they learn a lot of things. So the way they, the environment, they combine the environment with the texture. Next. And you see the olfactory memory, where they need to hear as well as they need to see simultaneously. So that kind of a connect that child has to the outside as well as, conversing with one another, such kind of spaces would really help them. Next. How does a child perceive the environment? This particular lady, Maria Montessori's studies of how children's brain work have been heavily prized by the neuroscience people. So if possible, you can go to the details of that. You see here, when designing spaces based on neuroarchitecture, it is necessary to take into account that each user receives and decodes the stimuli of the environment in a unique way. In other words, there are no rules set for this. You see this, all the three children. One child is treating this as a hiding place. Another is treating it as an to pee. And the third one is thinking something, they feel that it is a private place where they can, without any kind of interruption, they can think about. Next. And your child has grown up to a suitable environment for them since birth will produce more positive brain responses. There you will see the dopamine level in such children will be very, very high. Their memory, everything will be good. Their mood will be, serotonin will be at a high level and they'll be pretty good. And these responses that you see, that brain positive responses is very, very necessary for them to learn faster, feel more motivated and focused. Can we not adopt these things in our schools? We can. In fact, I did one experiment with Thakur School of Architecture Planning in Mumbai with using different colorations so that the students can actually, those color codes and the textures, everything was changed. The spaces were designed for not just for the physical activity or an event, but it's more in terms of, even if some student is in the solitude or something, they can go about and sit in one place, and that kind of an environment was built in that school. Okay, and human beings spend about 90% of their lives indoors. And especially if it is Western countries and the GCC countries, you will find them all the time indoor because of the external environmental conditions. Then imperative that the spaces we inhabit stimulate positive behaviors and the emotions, or at least don't influence us negatively. Some factors that can be applied to any environment inhabited by children, but which will be most efficient when incorporated into bedrooms, playrooms, classrooms, and these are the most important, and all these five exclude the taste, which does not fall under the mainstream, where you have sight, smell, hearing, and the touch becomes the most important, because when it comes to taste, children anywhere they are given the food or they are shown some toffees or chocolates, they really run around at that age. Next. The study approaches the concept of neuroarchitecture through different essential lenses, emphasizing its importance in the spatial design for children in the early childhood. Now, next. This is about the sight related. You can just see the child's vision. It's important to address the count, the colors, lighting, and all these factors are extremely important. Among other parameters, these effects can be measured by analyzing one, brain stimuli in the area of brain that are active during the period that the user is in the environment, the responses produced by the brain in that environment, and then the vital signs that the change in the environment, like heartbeat and perspiration and all those kind of things the child experience, or the fear, they go behind something and sit and they'll be waiting for someone to come out. All these kind of signals are very, we need to really look at when, especially if it is a school design, whether it is, I remember like when I was in MS Ramaiah, there was one girl, she would every day wait till everybody leaves from the premises, and she would go and sit one corner. She would sit in one corner and she would be crying every day. And this was a pattern. And I registered that this is a pattern which is happening with this girl. So let me check out what it is. When she was from Simla, so she was sent back. When she was sent back to her home, saying that you need to immediately meet a doctor, so parents were not ready for it. They said, no, nothing है, मेरी बच्ची तो बहुत ठीक है, कुछ भी problem नहीं है उसमें. I said, no, आपकी बच्ची में थोड़ा कुछ problem है. You have to address this. Otherwise, we will be forced to address. So then she took and she found there were certain neurological conditions that she was facing. And after that, she came back and she really scored distinction and all that, and she passed out from Ramaiah. Okay, next. Okay, now from here, I'll not be explaining everything because it will take a very long time. I'll have to give lot of examples in order to, this one, there are 10 principles of neuroarchitecture. This entire session was only to bring to the light that neurological aspect is to be considered while designing any particular building. So that is extremely important. The user is the most important. Only places where it is highly commercial, there is free flow and all that, only there we take into consideration the generic conditions. Otherwise, it is the, if it is only the single owner or they are only staying and all that, in such places you have to ensure that neurological conditions are considered. Even in the commercial places like mall and all that, there has to be spaces provided for people who are under depressions and all those things. They will not be, it is very wrong to think that there are so many happy people, and if a person is in depression state, if they come and join, they'll become happy. No, it is just not possible because it's a neurological aspect. Okay, so these are 12 principles which you can go through. It will be available on the YouTube. You can go through and you can contact me. Here I haven't put, first page I have my number, everything. You can contact me for any details. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Bigina, for giving this opportunity for me to talk about an area which has been least talked about. And any questions you have, you can either raise it now or you can call me and talk to me.